My jealous sister tried to ruin my life twice, first with a vicious high school rumor, then by stealing my fiancé at my wedding. I'm 27, and last night, I hosted my rehearsal dinner. Tomorrow, I'm getting married, but my mother is furious over something that went down during dinner. It ended with me kicking my sister out of the wedding after completely humiliating her, and now my mother is making me out to be the villain. I honestly want to know, am I really the bad guy here? Let me give you some background on my relationship with my sister. Elise is 2 years younger than me, and for reasons I've never fully understood, she has always despised me. I'm serious, I've never given her any real reason to hate me, yet it feels like she's been out to get me for as long as I can remember. And this isn't a new thing either. She's been this way since she was 15. Before that, we weren't particularly close, but at least she wasn't constantly at odds with me. Growing up, our dad treated us equally and didn't hesitate to call her out whenever she deliberately tried to push my buttons. But my mom? She had a soft spot for Elise. Maybe it was because she was the younger one, but anytime we fought, my mom would tell me to let it go because I was the older sister and needed to be the mature one. I thought she'd eventually grow out of that mindset, but clearly, she hasn't. Elise and I fought constantly for years, and by the time I was a senior in high school, I finally had enough and cut her off completely. She was a sophomore then, and pretty popular in her class. I don't know what got into her, but one day, she made it her mission to destroy my reputation. She started a nasty rumor about me, framing me for stealing. At the time, several girls had reported that their belongings were going missing. Eventually, we learned that a new janitor was behind the thefts, but Elise didn't care about the truth. She took it upon herself to spread the word that I was a kleptomaniac, telling everyone I was the one responsible. Since she was well liked, the rumor spread like wildfire, and you know how brutal high school kids can be. The bullying that followed was relentless. People called me names, treated me like a criminal, and made my life hell for weeks. It got so bad that I started skipping school just to avoid dealing with it. At a certain point, I couldn't just brush it off anymore. I needed to find out where the rumor had started. After a few days of digging, I finally uncovered the truth. Elise was the one who started it. I was stunned. I mean, it was cruel enough coming from anyone, but my own sister? That was a whole different level of betrayal. I could have confronted her privately, but she had humiliated me in front of the entire school, so I decided to return the favor. The next day, I marched up to her in the cafeteria and flat out asked if she was the one behind the rumors. She didn't even try to deny it. She just shrugged and said, "Yeah, so what?" That was all it took for me to lose it. I snapped. I started yelling, telling her exactly what kind of rumors I could have spread about her if I were as pathetic as she was. And the worst part? I wouldn't have even needed to lie. I reminded her loudly about how she had been two-timing her ex-boyfriend with his own cousin, and how all three of them had kept it a secret to avoid embarrassment. Then I brought up how she used to flirt with our housekeeper's son, who was 3 years older than her, until he got so uncomfortable that he complained to our parents. And for the final blow, I exposed her for something truly humiliating. I called her out for not showering during the holidays. Now, sure, a lot of people do that, but having it announced in front of a cafeteria full of teenagers? That's next level embarrassing. That day, Elise went from being one of the most popular girls in school to the biggest laughingstock. And you know what? I didn't even feel bad about it. She had started this war, and I had just finished it. When we got home, all hell broke loose. We had one of the worst fights of our lives, hurling insults back and forth. It got so heated that we were inches away from throwing punches, but thankfully, our parents stepped in before it turned physical. That was the last real conversation we ever had. From that moment on, we acted like the other didn't exist even though we still lived under the same roof. And honestly, I was relieved when I finally left for college. Even after I moved out, we stuck to the silent treatment. Whenever I came home for breaks, I completely ignored her, and she did the same. Years passed like this. By the time we had both graduated, we had no interest in seeing each other at all. We even had an unspoken agreement with our parents: whenever Elise visited, I stayed away, and vice versa. Even during the holidays, I'd only go home after she had already left. That arrangement worked for a long time. But 2 years ago, everything changed. My dad passed away suddenly from an aneurysm in the middle of the night. His death forced us all to be together for the funeral, and after that, Elise and I agreed to put our differences aside, for Mom's sake, at least. For the past 2 years, we've spent the holidays together, and while it's been incredibly awkward, we've made it work. Mom does her best to keep things peaceful, and I'm just grateful that my fiancé, Warren, has been there to make those family dinners a little more bearable. After my dad passed away, things between Elise and me were still tense, But I'd say we at least tried to hate each other less, or at least put on a show of civility for our mother's sake. So, when I got engaged a few months ago, my mom started pushing for me to invite Elise to the wedding. At first, I was completely against it. But Warren, my fiancé, suggested that maybe it wouldn't be the worst idea. He pointed out that it had been 10 years since our last fight, and since we were starting a new chapter in life, maybe it was time to finally bury the hatchet. As cheesy as that sounded, it kind of made sense. So, while finalizing the guest list, I went ahead and added Elise's name. That said, I didn't invite her to anything else, no engagement party, no bridal shower, because those were for close friends and family. But I figured it would be fine to have her at the wedding itself. When she got the invitation, she actually thanked me. She even admitted she hadn't expected one but was grateful that I was willing to move past everything. Because she seemed genuine, I had no reason to suspect she was up to something. And honestly, it had been 10 years. High school drama should be ancient history by now. Right now, my fiancé and I, along with all our guests, are staying at the hotel where the wedding is taking place. It's a bit outside the city, and we've been here for 2 days already. Most of our guests arrived the day before yesterday, and that evening, we hosted a welcome party for everyone who had traveled in from out of town. At the party, Elise was surprisingly social. She chatted with guests, laughed, and seemed to be having a genuinely good time. She even took a bunch of photos with me. Up until that point, I felt pretty good about my decision to invite her. But that feeling didn't last. By the next morning, everything had changed. In the middle of the night, Warren showed up at my door holding a letter, one that Elise had sent to his room. He and I are staying in separate rooms because both our families are a little superstitious and think it's bad luck for the couple to sleep in the same room before the wedding. In fact, his room is on an entirely different floor. The welcome party had wrapped up around midnight, and after that, everyone had gone back to their rooms. I was just about to go to bed myself when, around 1 a.m., Warren started knocking on my door. When I let him in, he silently handed me the letter. The moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. It was Elise's. It's pretty distinct, so there was no mistaking it. Right away, I could tell that something was seriously wrong. Warren explained that about 15 minutes earlier, a hotel staff member had delivered the letter to his room. The employee told him that it was from the lady in room 306. That was Elise's room number. She hadn't even bothered to sign her name, but at that point, it wasn't necessary, we both knew exactly who it was from. I guess she assumed Warren and I didn't have a strong relationship, which is just ridiculous, considering we're literally about to get married. She even opened the letter by saying she wanted this to stay between just the two of them. And then I started reading. Even by Elise's standards, this was next level shocking. I knew she had hated me in the past, but I honestly thought we'd moved past it. She had been acting completely normal, so I had no reason to suspect otherwise. But in this letter, she had gone into extreme detail about our history, but with one major twist, she had flipped the entire story around. She made it seem like I had been the one who hated her for no reason. That I had spent years bullying her. She even rewrote the whole high school incident, making it sound like I was the one who spread nasty rumors about her, and that when she called me out publicly, I got so humiliated that I cut her off. But she didn't stop there. She piled on more lies, claiming that even after we stopped speaking, I still found ways to make her life miserable. According to her, every time I came home from college, I would flirt with her boyfriend, so much so that it eventually led to their breakup. She wrote that I had traumatized her, that I had made her life a nightmare, and that growing up with me had been unbearable. And then came the part that truly left me speechless. She said the only reason she had decided to attend the wedding was because she believed Warren deserved better than me. She warned him that even though I was acting nice now, my true colors would come out soon enough, and she couldn't just stand by and let him ruin his life. But the worst part? She told Warren that if he wanted to, she'd be willing to elope with him. She admitted that even though she hadn't spent much time around him, she had already started to develop feelings for him. She claimed that fate had brought us all together again, not so Warren and I could get married, but so she could meet him. She ended the letter by saying she'd be waiting for him after the rehearsal dinner in the parking lot. She didn't want to be seen by any of the guests, so she suggested meeting in secret to discuss everything. It was beyond insane. As soon as Warren finished reading the letter, he had come straight to me. And honestly, I was still struggling to wrap my head around what I had just read. Warren looked sick to his stomach. Ironic, really, because I was the one who had to comfort him. He kept apologizing over and over, saying he was the one who had encouraged me to invite Elise, the one who thought it would be good for us to finally move on. But I didn't blame him. Let me make that clear, any reasonable person would think that two grown adults, pushing 30, should be able to let go of high school drama. But apparently, Elise wasn't capable of that. Warren was shocked. I was furious. She had played the part so well, acting normal, pretending everything was fine, and I had actually started to trust her again. And yet, here she was, trying to take advantage of that trust in the worst way possible. I guess it's true what they say, even after a snake sheds its skin, it's still a snake. That was Elise. She hadn't changed, and she never would. So, I decided history was going to repeat itself. And just like before, she was going to be humiliated. I told Warren my plan, and he was immediately on board. Honestly, he didn't even care how we handled it, he was just disgusted. Creeped out by how psychotic and desperate my sister was acting. It was honestly sad. He and I had been together for 4 years. Everyone knew how much we loved each other. So what was her goal here? Was this just her way of getting back at me for something? Either way, she wasn't getting away with it. Our plan was simple, and I'm sure some people could already guess where this was going. After spending about half an hour with me in my room, Warren went back to his own and called Elise. He told her exactly what she wanted to hear, that he was willing to talk after the rehearsal dinner. He said that when the time came, he would order a whiskey on ice, and that would be her cue to slip out quietly. Then, 10 minutes later, he would meet her in the parking lot. Last night, after dessert had been served, Warren asked the waiter for a whiskey on ice. Just as we expected, Elise immediately excused herself, saying she needed to use the ladies' room. That was our sign she was actually going through with this. But instead of sneaking off to meet her, Warren and I stood up in front of everyone. We told them about the letter. We read it aloud. Needless to say, the room fell dead silent. Shock, disbelief, everyone was processing what they had just heard. But we didn't give them much time to dwell on it. We told them that, at that very moment, Elise was waiting for Warren in the parking lot. And if anyone still had doubts, they were welcome to come see for themselves. I don't think anyone did have doubts, but that didn't stop them from following us outside. And sure enough, there she was. For a second, Elise just froze, like a deer caught in headlights. But then, once she realized what was happening, she ran. It was pointless, of course. There was nowhere to run. Everyone had already seen her. Everyone knew. What followed was chaos. No one really knew what to do or say. So I took charge. I told everyone to go back to their rooms except for my mother and my in-laws. The 4 of us made our way to Elise's room. I wasn't sure if she would even be there, but when we knocked several times, she finally opened the door. Her face was blotchy and red. The moment she saw me, she lunged. Warren stepped in, pushing her back before she could get to me. I didn't even flinch. I just looked her in the eye and told her to get out. She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She didn't say a single word. She just turned around and walked back inside. That's when we saw it, she had already started packing. She knew there was no coming back from this. The hardest part was watching my mother. She broke down right there in Elise's room, asking her why. Why would she do something like this? And the worst part? We all knew the answer. It wasn't even about Warren. She didn't want him, she just wanted to hurt me. Elise still didn't speak. She just finished packing as quickly as she could, grabbed her bags, and left. After that, there wasn't much else to say. My in-laws went to bed, but before Warren and I could leave, my mother stopped us. She told us she understood why we were upset. That what Elise did was wrong. But, she said, that didn't justify the way we handled it. I was stunned. She went on to say that if I had a problem with what Elise wrote in that letter, I should have handled it like an adult. I should have confronted her in private. Kicked her out quietly. Instead, I had humiliated her in front of everyone, just like I had back in high school. And that's when I snapped. I told my mother I should have seen this coming because she had always been on Elise's side. Even now, my mother was more worried about Elise's feelings than mine. That was her darling daughter, after all. She didn't seem to care that Elise had brought this humiliation on herself. I told her as much, but she kept arguing. She admitted finally that what Elise had done was awful. That she never should have pushed me to invite her in the first place. But, she said, that still didn't give me the right to handle it the way I did. She accused me of dragging our family's name through the mud, of turning my own wedding into a spectacle. She said it was juvenile of me to involve all the guests and that they had probably felt awkward and uncomfortable. That instead of enjoying the celebration, everyone would now only be talking about this. But I didn't care. I didn't care what she thought. I didn't care what the guests thought. I got back at Elise. That's all that mattered. So I told my mother exactly that, then Warren and I went back to our room. Today, we had a free day between the rehearsal dinner and the wedding, so everyone was off doing their own thing. At some point, I pulled my maid of honor and a few of my bridesmaids aside and asked them what people were saying. Were they still talking about what had happened last night? Of course they were. They said people had definitely been shocked it wasn't the kind of drama you just brushed off, but that by the time the wedding rolled around, they'd move on. Then I asked them for their honest opinion. Had I gone too far? Most of them told me the same thing: it was your choice to handle it how you wanted. There's no such thing as too far when it comes to someone like Elise. But my mother still hadn't spoken to me since last night. And, for some reason, that made me feel weirdly guilty. Maybe she was right. Maybe I shouldn't have taken matters into my own hands like that. Maybe it was a juvenile plan. But in the moment, all I had wanted was for Elise to feel just as humiliated as I had. To feel that same gut-wrenching embarrassment. And really, it wasn't my fault she was stupid enough to put all of that in writing. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. Update. Hey, guys, so, I'm getting married in the morning, and I really should be sleeping right now instead of risking dark circles on my wedding day. But I had to get this off my chest. Earlier this evening, I talked to Warren about everything going on with my mother. I also read a bunch of comments from people who said what I did was a lot. Some agreed that after what Elise pulled, I had every right to go scorched earth on her. But others pointed out that I could have handled it in a better way. And, in a way, my mother had been right. I probably didn't handle it in the best way possible. But that was my choice. I don't have to be politically correct all the time. Sometimes, I can just do whatever I want without thinking about the consequences. But that doesn't mean I don't have to face the consequences. And in this case, the consequence was sorting things out with my mother. Because whether I liked it or not, she was upset. A couple of hours ago, Warren and I went to my mother's room. She looked upset, but as soon as she saw us, she pulled us both into a hug. Before we could even say anything, she told us she had been thinking about coming to us herself. She pulled us inside, sat down, and said she wanted to apologize for her reaction last night. She admitted that she had only been looking at things from her perspective and hadn't even stopped to consider how I might have felt. Now that she'd had a full day to think about it, she realized just how outrageous Elise's letter really was. She still might not have handled it the way I did, but she now understood that it wasn't her place to tell me how to respond. It was my life, my choice. And if humiliating Elise was what it took for me to feel vindicated, that was up to me. I was relieved that she had come to that conclusion on her own, but I also told her that she had a point, too. I apologized for snapping at her. I thought that would be the end of it, but then she surprised me. She apologized again, this time for always siding with Elise when we were kids. She admitted that it was probably why I had assumed she'd take Elise's side no matter what. But then she told me something unexpected. After Elise left, my mom had cut her off. She said she wasn't planning on speaking to her again unless she sincerely apologized to both Warren and me. That was all I needed to hear. The tension in the room finally eased, and the three of us spent some time just talking about how excited we were for the wedding tomorrow. Then, Warren and I went back to our room. Looking back, I'm really glad I listened to the advice I got and decided to talk to my mom. It definitely paid off. And now, I'm about to get married as a truly happy woman. Update 2. Hey, everyone, so, I got married to Warren last week. I really thought the whole mess with my sister was over. She had already been humiliated and kicked out of the wedding. There was literally no reason for her to come back and try to stir up more drama. And yet, here we are. Elise just could not let it go. This time, she took to Facebook. She made a public post saying that the only reason she had tried to convince Warren to leave with her was because I was a terrible human being. That she was just trying to give him a chance at a better life. And to make things worse, she even claimed that Warren had been dropping hints to her whenever they spoke. Obviously, that was a blatant lie. I trust Warren more than anyone. He has proven his loyalty to me time and time again, and I know he would never do something like that. So I honestly have no idea what she thought she was going to accomplish. I didn't even see the post at first because I had her blocked. But a few relatives sent it to me, and thankfully, they all knew the truth. They had seen the letter, they had seen her get caught red-handed, and they weren't about to let her rewrite history. So, before I even had to do anything, they demolished her in the comments. People were calling her out left and right, pointing out that she had been exposed in front of everyone. I kept getting screenshots of her getting absolutely dragged, and honestly, Warren and I couldn't stop laughing. She must have realized she had no way out of it because about half an hour ago, she took the post down. At this point, it's just sad. If she would just apologize, she could still have a relationship with our mother, the only person who might still want anything to do with her. But instead, she's doubling down, burning bridges left and right, and completely wrecking her own reputation. And it's not just with family. This was a public post. I'm pretty sure her coworkers and friends saw it, too. She's embarrassing herself over and over again, and for what? I don't even feel angry anymore. I just feel pity. I don't know what happened to make her this obsessed with me, but whatever it is, I hope she gets over it soon. This kind of behavior isn't healthy for anyone. Update 3. After my last update, a lot of people suggested that I talk to my mother and try to figure out why Elise became the person she is today. And honestly, I was curious, too. Because like I said before, Elise and I had been fine growing up until she turned 15. Something had to have happened to make her resent me so much. So, a few hours ago, I called my mom and asked if she had any idea what really triggered all of this. She didn't have a clear memory of it, but she told me that she actually had a conversation with Elise about it a few years back. Apparently, Elise told her that she was sick of being compared to me. Which was strange, because no one in our family did that. We were never raised that way. And honestly, we were equal in pretty much everything: looks, academics, even social circles. There was no reason for her to feel like I was some superior golden child. But then my mom told me something I didn't know. When Elise was 15, she had been secretly dating a guy from my year. He had forced her to keep the relationship hidden, and, according to her, he was constantly comparing her to me. Which was ironic because I had rejected that guy several times. I guess that messed with her head. She never told me about the relationship, so I had no idea this was happening. And then, not long after, came the incident in high school where I humiliated her. That only made things worse. Apparently, people had mocked her for months afterward. And even that guy, the one who had been comparing her to me, ended up dumping her after the whole thing. I had already graduated by then, so I had no idea this was still following her. But all those little things must have built up over time until she really started resenting me. It's honestly kind of sad. If she had just talked to me about that guy, maybe we could have sorted things out back then. Maybe she wouldn't have spent all these years hating me. But now it's too late. Maybe one day, we'll be able to clear the air. But right now, all I can do is feel bad for her. Thankfully, Warren and I are leaving for our honeymoon in a couple of days, and honestly, I need the distraction.